Medina was in a lot of pain. She really couldn't sleep that night, and she said, let's call the ambulance and, just make sure the kids get to school, and then once everything is settled, meet me at the hospital. So she called the ambulance, and the ambulance came in. She said goodbye to the kids. And, the kids, were upset, but this was the norm for them. They were kind of used to seeing these things happen. Took the kids to school, and went to the hospital. Usually when I walk into the hospital, I say her name, and they kind of, yeah, she's in this room, and they'll kind of escort me. This time they were like, just wait right here 1 second. And instead of going into the emergency room, we made like a sharp left and into a room. And I'm like, what's going on? And they told me that Medina died. My name is Daniel Ratchford, and I grew up in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx. I currently reside in Hackensack, New Jersey. Everybody called me Danny. Dan. Yeah, that's it. In my early childhood years, growing up in the Bronx, I was lucky enough to grow up in a 2-parent home. My parents were married and lived together, so I feel like I was blessed to be that person, because in my neighborhood that doesn't occur too often. We weren't rich. We were raised in the projects. We were a very close-knit family. I have an older brother, Chris, a younger brother, Jason, and a younger sister, Jessica. We were raised to put family first. Growing up in the neighborhood, we had tons of friends, and we played outside, and we would get called to come home for dinner when the lights went on in the neighborhood. Growing up in a 2-family home, my parents were looked at as, everybody's parents. Just growing up in those times, people were allowed to discipline other people's kids. So, growing up in the neighborhood, my dad would grab our friends and, just discipline them and just make sure that they had what they needed. There were times that my parents would go out of their way to bring my friends to join in some of the activities that me and my brothers and my sister were going to do. Looking back on it, we were looked at as just lucky, My dad worked in an auto parts store. He was a stock person there, and it was in the neighborhood. So walking to school, we had to walk past his job. So we would walk to school with him, and then on the way home from school, we would always stop at his job to, talk him out of some money. My mother worked for 9X at the time. She worked for the telephone company for 25 years. So she was in Manhattan, so she was a little further from home. But You know, my parents did everything that they had to do to provide for us. I think they sacrificed a lot, you know, just to make sure that we grew up as a family, you know, and together, and we did things together. Christmas time was always a time where we were together, decorating the tree, playing Motown's Christmas albums, Jackson 5, Temptations, you know, and we would make it a good time. Under the age of 10, I still believed in Santa Claus to an extent. Knew that my parents worked very hard, but you know, they tried their best to keep our childhood exactly that, a childhood. Growing up with brothers, you know, we usually rolled together playing sports. So I can remember one time playing sports, and one of the other kids who lived in the building got into a fist fight with my brother. So after the fist fight, you know, we went home, and my parents were like, "Did you win? No? Did you guys jump in? Like, you guys are a family, so if not, you know what? Go back out there and we'll be here when you get back." You know, like it just kind of reinforces family, you know, like if one is going through something, that we're all going through it, and we stick by them until it's done. As a teenager, going into high school was, you know, just a different element. You know, I did pretty well in school, but, you know, I was still trying to find myself. In high school, you meet new people. That's the time when you find yourself, you know, and you experiment with different friends, and you meet different people from different neighborhoods, and you just get introduced to things that are not in Throg's Neck. So in high school, played sports, and with sports, during the off season, was introduced to, you know, alcohol and marijuana. So you know, it became, you know, during the weekends, smoking and drinking became a thing. You know, just hanging out with the guys, and kind of led me into just seeing the Bronx for what it was, and, you know, not in that Throg's Neck bubble where, you know, where it wasn't too many things going on. I was out in the city running into different elements of the city. In high school, I played football for Lehman High School. I thought I was pretty good. A little too light and short, but played all through junior high school and into high school, so I knew how to play ball. It was something that was a goal in life and something I wanted to do. So it was a passion. So the alcohol and the drugs turned into, you know, me wanting to rebel, you know, me having different views in life, you know, that kind of pushed against all the things that my parents have taught me throughout the years. With that, being a teenager, you know, you're growing into your own, and, you know, you start to get a little facial hair, and, you know, you think you're a man. So my parents would try to clamp down on me, and, you know, just getting into confrontations with my dad, you know, him being a father and giving me advice, you know, and, you know, during those times, The advice was, boy, you don't know better than me, so it turned into, not hostile, but we had a difference of opinion. I thought I was a man, and and he was trying to teach me the best way to be a man. He would win. He would win, definitely. He had a louder voice than me. The way he parented, he was the disciplinarian. Like during those times, you catch your ass whipping. My mom, I was still scared of her. There was times where she would chase me around, but it was always, the thing that would get me would be, wait till your dad gets home. A difficult moment in my journey as a teenager was one day in high school. I was walking down the hallway with my headphones on, and being a teenager in the hip hop era, I'm rapping to myself, or I thought was myself, and a teacher overheard some of the words that I was saying and said that I threatened him. So later on in the day, the security guards come to me and they're like, you threatened so-and-so? And I'm like, what? I didn't threaten anybody. What are you talking about? So they're like, you know what? Just smooth it over with Mr. So-and-so and whatever. Don't worry about it. So I go to the teacher's class, just to figure out what was going on. And he slammed the door in my face. So being a hot-headed teenager, football player, not knowing, how to take that, I kind of pushed the door open and threatened him then. Told him I would kick his ass. Not the right thing to do. And that situation turned into me getting suspended from school. It was my senior year. I was on the honor roll, played football, but that was a moment that was very embarrassing, and my parents were involved then. We had to go to a school hearing, and as we were in the elevator, we ran into the vice principal of the school, and they told me, you know what, just plead to whatever they're saying, and we'll let you back into the school so you can graduate and go to the prom and have everything. So my dad pulled me aside and he's like, do you want to plead to this? And I was like, yeah, because I want to go back to the school. Are you sure you want to plead to this? If it's something that you said you didn't do, are you sure you want to do it? He's like, yeah, I just want to go back to the school. Are you sure, Daniel? And I'm like, yeah. So he let me make my own decision. I sat there at the table and said that I did whatever they were saying I did, that I threatened the teacher. And the superintendent for New York City said, well, we're kicking you out of the school and we're going to send you somewhere. So, that was, to me at the time, that was devastating. I couldn't graduate with the kids that I went to junior high school and straight through high school with. Couldn't go to the prom. Just to be kicked out of a school, and it was very humbling. It was very it was just a moment that I wish I would have slowed down a little bit and kind of stuck to my laurels and listen to my dad. It's a great segment. So after that situation, how I coped with that situation wasn't the best. I remember my first day in going into a new high school. I sat in the park and drank a beer right before going into school. So, walking into the school, having to take off all my stuff, to go through a metal detector, it was just like shocking. It wasn't the high school that I was used to. So, going to a new school, It was senior year. I was maybe 3 months away from graduating. I didn't even care to make any new friends, so I was pretty much rolling by myself, doing whatever I wanted to do by myself. School was easy for me, thank God, and I pretty much had all the credits that I needed to graduate. During that time, what I wanted to do after high school really didn't come into focus for me. Like I could care less, you know. I remember going to a college fair and meeting a young lady who was a representative for the college, and she a beautiful young lady, and she asked me, "Hey, what did you score on your SAT? What were your grades?" And basically, based off of what she looked like, that was the school that I picked to go to college. I graduated from Columbus High School, and never walked across the stage to receive my diploma. At the time, I was working, so I had money. So right before getting my diploma, I was told that I wasn't going to get my diploma because I had to pay senior dues. And, I figured I only went to the school for 3 months. Why do I have to pay senior dues? So after going back and forth with the principal, pulling a wad of money out of my pocket and saying, "Here's your money, give me my diploma," kind of was just the way I was living life, just rebelling and, just being a person who, just a person who wanted to just live life under my circumstances. The story of Medina and I started when we were kids. She grew up in Boston, and her grandmother lived in the building across from where I lived. So we would see her on the weekend and holidays. She had an older brother who played sports, played football with us, and she would kind of sit on the side and just watch what we were doing, play with my younger sister. So she was just one of the neighborhood kids who we would see, and we would hang out with their family. As time went on, our families knew each other when they were kids. So we would go visit them sometimes in New Jersey for birthday parties. Then going into the teenage years, she moved to Arizona with her brother to live with her father, who lived in Arizona. So we kind of lost that connection, but they always were on my mind. I was best friends with her cousin, so they were still pretty close. Whenever they would visit, we'd still see them. But the connection was lost. Fast forward to me graduating high school. I one day ran into Michael, who was her cousin, and he told me that Medina and Anwar, who was Medina's brother, were back into town, and that the next time that they were around, he would hit me up, and just so I could see them. So one day he gives me a call, and he's like, "Yo, Medina's in town. Yo, come meet me." So we met up, and I'm walking towards Michael, and I walk up on the car, and she's sitting in the car, and from there it was like a connection. She had grown from a kid to a woman. So we began talking, and that one conversation went from like a 20-minute conversation to standing there on Schley Avenue for like 2-3 hours, just catching up, and just an exciting time, to be able to reconnect with her. And through that time, it kind of grew into us dating, and us falling in love. Like, it was just a summer where we kind of just fell for each other, and everything was great. At the same time, her cousin Michael had a baby, Malia. There would be times when me and Medina would be on a date, and after the date, we would come back to her grandmother's house, who still lived in the neighborhood, and just to find her grandmother, who was in her 80s and had a leg amputated, and shouldn't be taking care of a baby. She would be up at midnight caring for a crying baby, so we would walk into the house and be like, what's going on here? Like, where is this guy? Like, he has a kid here that's crying. What's going on? So automatically, Medina's maternal instinct kind of kicked in, and it went from me and Medina being together all the time to me, Medina, and Malia being together all the time. And just seeing that and just thinking back on it, Medina, like, she was a mother from that point on. Protecting Malia was the most important thing in her life. Few months after Malia was born, and Medina starting to take care of her, we found out Medina was pregnant. So, within a span of 9 months, I was a family man with 2 kids. Daniel was born on October 9th, 1998. And it was a life-changing experience for me. Seeing him born was, just him taking his first breath was, it just took, you could feel the shock go through my body. Like, just knowing that I had a person who kind of depended on me and needed me to step up and be a father. I took to the responsibility. I thank my father for being that kind of pillar. It wasn't a hard transition for me. It was just a transition, but I saw the blueprint, so it was easy for me to step in. Being able to start the family with Medina at a young age was very scary. Not knowing how we were going to provide for the 2 kids was tough. Like, we were 19 at the age at that time, so just not knowing how we were going to provide was a challenge. I was in college working, so I was doing a lot of the heavy lifting, if you want to call that. But coming home to see Malia, Danny, and Medina was always a highlight of the day. A month after Medina gave birth to Daniel, we were hanging out one day at my parents' house, just drinking Coronas, and we woke up the next day and Medina was vomiting just profusely over and over and over. So we knew it was more than just being hungover. So I rushed her to the hospital, and the doctors took a look at her and said that her spleen had ruptured. At 19, you really don't know what was going on. I'm not a doctor, you know, I didn't go to school to be a doctor. So, you know, like, it was sort of like, please do whatever you could to help her, please. So they removed her spleen, and within 2 weeks or so, she was back to life as normal. You know, they removed her spleen, they stitched her up. You know, she stayed in the hospital maybe 2 or 3 days, went home, recovered for a little bit, and then we were right back to life as, you know, raising the 2 kids. So over the next 10 years, Medina was in and out of the hospital with different blood clots throughout her body. She was diagnosed with a disease called protein S deficiency, and it's where your blood clots too much. So she would have clots in her arms where they would have to literally cut open her arm and pluck out the clot. She had different surgeries. She had strokes. She had heart attacks. She had just different episodes that would happen where one day everything would be normal, and the next moment I was rushing her to the hospital because her leg was hurting or her arm was hurting or she had a headache, and those symptoms would turn out being clots all over her body. So she went from being just a normal teenage mother to you know, just not knowing what was going on with her body. So after years of Medina struggling with her health and raising the kids, we decided that it would be best that we get married. So in October of 2005, we got married. It was one of the best days of my life. We were able to bring in all of my family, and most of her family was there, and you know, it was a celebration. Seeing her like in her wedding dress and, you know, walking down the aisle, it was a special. And just people from the outside not knowing everything that had been going on for the past 6 years, you know, you wouldn't be able to tell. She was beautiful, and you couldn't tell. She looked like a normal young lady who was ready to live the rest of her life happy. So 4 years after her being married, or us being married, her sickness had progressed to where the clots were harder to be removed. In those 4 years, she had a very serious stroke. In those 4 years, she had both of her legs amputated. It was devastating to me and my kids. You know, for the 10 years that we were together, just living, not knowing what was going on with her health. Living, you know, like where the kids didn't have a stable, you know, mom there. You know, she was in and out of the hospital. At some times she would be in the hospital for months, weeks. So, you know, the kids kind of thought that was a norm. And, you know, just, I did my best. Thank God we had family that was able to help me with the kids. But, you know, the kids and I, you know, it was very traumatic for us. in February of 2009, Medina was in a lot of pain. She really couldn't sleep that night, and the conversations we were having, she said, let's call the ambulance and, just make sure the kids get to school. And then once everything is settled, meet me at the hospital. So she called the ambulance, and the ambulance came in. They put her on a stretcher, took her out the house. She said goodbye to the kids. And, the kids, were upset, but this was the norm for them. They were kind of used to seeing these things happen. I took the kids to school, and went to the hospital. Usually when I walk into the hospital, I say her name, and they kind of, she's in this room, and they'll kind of escort me. This time they were like, just wait right here 1 second. And instead of going into the emergency room, we made like a sharp left and into a room. And I'm like, what's going on? And they told me that Medina died. My bully moment is when I had to tell my kids that their mother, Medina, had passed away. I picked up kids up from school, and I had most of my family was at the house. So I knew I didn't want to tell the kids in front of them. I kind of wanted to take that moment for us to be together. So on the way home, we pulled over at a park, and I told the kids to get out the car. And, I told them that I loved them, gave them hugs, and they're like, why are we here? And I told them, hey, your mom died today. And just seeing their faces, and, they cried, and they were very upset, but you could also tell that they really didn't understand everything that was to come. That was my bully moment. The death of Medina affected me and my kids in many ways. Going from having a mother and father to only having a father for my kids' sake was hard for them. I always looked to my parents as just a blueprint of how, a family is supposed to be. So not having the mother figure in the house kind of changed how I wanted to parent. For a while, I tried my hardest to try to be both the mother and the father. But I was going through my own struggles with grief, so I settled on just being the father, just being the discipline, just making sure they were on time to things, making sure they were getting things done that they needed to get done. And a lot of the hugs and kisses that, the mother or their mother would usually give were not there for them. So the problems that I faced emotionally after Medina died was just me as a man not being able to express my emotions and work through them. Instead, I found every which way possible to avoid and just to numb the pain that I had inside. Between working, drinking, smoking, women, it kind of led me through like just dark times in my life, a lot of things that I'm not proud of, and just being able to be there for my kids was just something that I missed on. I think just looking back on things, being able to show them how to express their emotions would have been beneficial, and instead, my kids kind of grew up missing like that emotional side. It kind of plays into, mom being there to give them hugs and kisses. That side was missing. So my kids struggled for a while, just being able to deal with the grief that they had inside, being able to talk about their mother and, being able to share fun memories. There were years that went past whenever a holiday would come up, from Thanksgiving all the way to Mother's Day. We would be in conflict, arguing with each other and just butting heads on everything, just because those memories would bring out the grief in us, and we didn't know how to deal with it. And just a lot of missed time that could have been better put forward, like if we knew, where to put that love. After Medina passed away, I was in search for just connections, maybe a mentor, a community, just someone who could understand what I was going through at the time. Being 29 years old, African American, born and raised in the Bronx, I've had experiences, and just looking for someone to kind of just point me in the right direction and to have these conversations with me didn't happen. So I was kind of in a space where I felt like no one could relate to what I was going through, and it brought me to a place in my life now where this is what we created when we created Bereavement. Bereavement is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting men and boys of color with grief and bereavement. What we do is teach men and boys healthy ways of coping with grief instead of the drinking and smoking and all the other unhealthy things that us guys usually do. We throw meditation classes, cooking classes, art therapy classes, journaling classes, all different healthy coping skills we're trying to teach. And behind those classes, we have conversation with men about experiences in their life. I'm finding that a lot of men are going through things in life that they don't talk about. They bury it inside, and it either goes a couple of different ways. You either try to drink it away, or it comes out as anger, and then that usually you end up locked up or just in a bad situation, and you look back on the things that have happened in your life, and sometimes just a conversation could have helped ease that pain that you had inside. It's important for me to share my testimonial story because I am being vulnerable, and I've learned that being vulnerable is a strength and not a weakness. I've learned that being able to share your story helps other people who are going through similar things. And when they see that you have come out the other side, or even that you're on that journey, it helps them heal, and it in turn helps me heal too. Being a part of the Bully Magazine Docuseries makes me feel very honored that I was invited to do this. I look at myself as a regular guy from the Bronx who has been through some things, and to be invited here to kind of tell my story on this platform just gives us, puts eyes on us, and just the different approach that we're looking to help the community, our community, the Black community, heal through some of the hard situations that we go through in life. Where I'm at now in life is I'm much happier. I have recently married a young lady who I dated for the past 12, 13 years. And we recently decided that we were going to get married, and it's brought my life kind of to a place where I'm able to love again. I'm able to give my full heart to someone and not be afraid that they're not going to be there. And Yvonne is a special person. I was very lucky to meet her at the time of my life when it wasn't the best time of my life, and she was able to understand some of the things that I was going through and work me through it. My kids they have their struggles, but I think through my journey they look to me, and see that all the healing that that has been happening in my life the past couple of years, and they kind of want to join in on it. So just being that influence on them is very important to me. And life is better. Life. I once heard like a quote from, it was an author. She was talking about not only wanting to live your life for the length of it, but living your life for the width of it, and being able to fill it up with just great memories, and being able to help people and to leave something, where people can remember you, and your name will always live on because you left something positive for people to carry forward. I want to say thank you to my parents for always supporting me. I want to say thank you to my siblings, my kids. I want to say thank you to one of my best friends, Q, for introducing me to Bully Magazine. I want to thank the young lady I was in an Uber with, and she told me that my story was inspirational and I should start writing it down. That was a moment, that kind of brought bereavement to life, brought me to life, and I also want to send a message to anyone who's listening to this that your story is important. No matter what you're going through, your story, the way you've lived it, the way you've gotten through it, could always help someone who's going through a similar situation.